Hello again. I'm back with my Infernal Shade Necro. I'm sorry. I said that it was going to be the end, but I lied. In 092 that came out recently, they released a bunch of new uniques, including one that resurrects your zombies, and one that creates more zombies when you take potions. And those two items just totally changed how this build can play. It opened up a ton of flexibility. And so I wanted to just make another video, show you how those things play out and what kind of options you have, because there's a lot of really cool things, including like a one-button build even that you can do. So the core is really the same. We're using Infernal Shade. We're getting all the good damage boosts that we can, and the chaining when the target dies. Legion is kind of useful if you are doing monos, just because it speeds up your damage a little bit by throwing out 2 shades at a time. And then we use Sacrifice with the Flickering Shadows node that bumps up our Infernal Shade damage by 250% per sacrifice, but kills the duration down to 2 seconds. We chained a bunch of things, a bunch of sacrifices with Sanguine Libation and Catalyst of Horror. And I'm doing this a little bit differently. I'm now actually going up into this route because I never cast Sacrifice manually anymore. So the mana cost doesn't matter anymore. And I found out that this Avatar of Decay is actually a multiplier, not an increased damage. For whatever reason, in Sacrifice, they still say increased, but it's actually a more. So the 60% multiplier for damage over time is really nice for monoliths. So we have this massively ramping Infernal Shade that only has a 2-second duration, and then we use Dread Shade with the Infernal Dread node to refresh the duration of those Infernal Shades every time we cast it. So as long as we cast Dread Shade within 2 seconds, our Infernal Shade can persist forever. And in practice, we're casting Dread Shade a lot. In fact, that might be the only skill you're really casting, besides occasional Infernal Shades manually. Dread Shade is kind of the workhorse of the build. It does a ton of things. For one, we get our own Dread Shade benefits, and then with Martyrdom, we get a huge armor boost, 25 per vitality. That works out to be usually 1,500 to 2,000 flat armor that then gets multiplied by armor percentages. It's quite good. And most importantly, Dread Shade, whenever a minion dies with Dread Shade, you get another zombie back. And whenever anyone dies with Dread Shade, you also cast Sacrifice for 3 times for free. So that's the core. And then, of course, because we're making zombies for free, and because the new unique and experimental items are zombie focused, we definitely want to specialize in zombies. There's a few ways you can go here. Because we're making so many zombies now, I'm no longer doing just healing from zombies. All that health and healing effectiveness gear really dropped aside. Now we're just going directly to ward from max health of zombies. Because you're getting so many zombies that you can make so much ward, it outstrips what you can generate just from healing and like Twisted Heart alone, for example. This is a playstyle thing. I love 3 Seconds of Fear. It's so long. It's a solid crowd control. Things are usually dead by the time it wears off. Because you just have to tag something with Infernal Shade, positioning doesn't matter. So once something's tagged, you can fear it, and they can go wherever. As long as you keep sacrificing, you'll keep ramping the damage up, and then everything will die. A big use of zombies is, of course, Vile Force. That creates two more minions, little worms, when the zombie dies, which is very important for ramping up damage. Essentially, every time you make a zombie, you're really getting 3 minions. Shepherd of Thralls is really good, but to get Vital Ward and Army of Nightmares, I don't have enough points left over to get Shepherd of Thralls instead, but we can make up for that on the passive side. And it's totally worth it because there's just so many zombies that getting the one extra skeleton per zombie is you often waste skeletons. And this is just for health multiplication, which gives us more ward. So that's yeah, but there are other things that I'll go over about how you can spec into zombies differently. So for our last skill, you have a ton of options here, and what I've actually found, what I've been enjoying lately is Bone Curse. Never thought I would take this, but Bone Prison is actually insane for this build because when you make a Bone Prison, each of the segments is a minion that can be sacrificed. So right now, I make 11 minions with one cast. This is ridiculous, and they can stack. I had 22 minions there. And I have no cooldown reduction right now. I just have this 1 point in Shattered Prison. This takes it from a 20-second cooldown to a 6-second cooldown. This does not use normal cooldown rules. This is true 70% cooldown reduction, going from 20 to 6, excuse me. But this does reduce the number of minions you summon. If you don't take Shattered Prison, you get 20 minions per cast. So it's crazy. And then you sacrifice them, and you can do so much damage up front because you just ramp instantly with sacrifice chaining through all of your bone prisons. The rest of bone, like I don't actually cast it that much except against bosses. I went over to Misery just so that I would still get a bonus from some ward from Twisted Heart when I cast Bone Prison. And then 4 points in Cursed Limbs. So you've actually do a ton of hits with both Sacrifice and Bone Nova. So you can consistently keep casting Bone Curse, which doesn't generate more Bone Prisons. It's only when you directly cast Bone Curse. But you can keep up slows on the enemies and stuff like that. So it's fine. I didn't see that much else that would be really useful, and I preferred Cursed Limbs to Cursed Ground. It seemed more reliable. Plus, I wanted the slowing anyway. You could go into Chill as well if you want. So yeah, that's Bone Curse, the oddly effective damage ramp for Infernal Shade. In terms of gear, our stat priorities are pretty much the same, except we don't care about healing effectiveness anymore. We're mainly looking for armor, health, minion health to give us more ward, and then int. I prefer int to spell damage because int will give us more damage, it'll give us more health from zombies, so more ward, and it also will give us ward retention. So int is very good. Vitality, even with the changes to Vitality, we still like it because more health still means more ward from Twisted Heart, and also because of that Martyrdom node, it's still good to have Vitality to give us armor. And then anything left or on offensive stats, you can get elemental damage over time is great just because of how much scaling you get. It doesn't apply to all the flat damage bonuses we have, like from Rotmind and Lich's Envy. Oh no, it does to Lich's Envy, sorry, but not to Rotmind. But still, it's the scaling on elemental damage over time is so ridiculous that that's my priority there. And then just normal damage over time and spell damage are both very good choices. So yeah, as far as gear, what has really changed is we dropped our rings for Putrescence. And Putrescence is kind of intended, it seems like, to get you to play Repulsive Vomit zombies, because that will give you the +1 to damage over time minion skills and extra poison damage and stuff from that. But that sucks. I don't want to do putrid zombies. I want to do explosive zombies and pump my Infernal Shade. And that's all that matters there is that first line. Zombies have a chance to resurrect equal to 100% divided by your number of zombies. So that means that you will never have less than one zombie. And in practice, you will usually have, if you have 2 rings, you will usually have 2 zombies. So I'm actually not 100% sure if this triggers when the zombie dies or 1 second later when it does the check. I'm assuming when it dies. But in any case, you can see that they die a fraction of a second apart from each other, and then they both come back. So I think that is because I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it works. But anyway, I almost never go below 2 zombies with 2 rings. The only other stat that matters to us at all is the ward retention, and you want that as high as you can get. I've gotten garbage, but if you can get 26 ward retention, that's great. Go for it. So this essentially, what this does is you saw that I didn't specialize in skeletons anymore because I'm now just casting Dreadshade and Infernal Shade. And Infernal Shade is, 1 cast and then most of it is Dreadshade. And that's all I have to do. I don't need the mana. I don't need to cast Sacrifice manually because I'm getting it automatically from Dreadshade. And I just keep making more zombies for free. They just keep coming back. I'll get a zombie off each Dreadshade, and then these zombies will resurrect, and now we have 4 zombies. It's crazy. So this is all about just spamming Dreadshade now. So we don't need mana, and we don't need skeletons. Just the volume of zombies you put out is incredible. And then to make it even better, we now have this experimental item that creates volatile zombies on potion use. This is absurd because it's free, and you could just get more zombies. You can create them anytime you want. And we get around the ridiculous, 100 almost mana cost of volatile zombies because of Vile Force and potentially Shepherd of Thralls. So we can now make zombies on demand, and they all come back. It's craziness. For the rest of the gear, we still want Lich's Envy especially because of the mana reduction, but also because of the fire damage per Infernal Shade that gives us a chance to prepare for boss fights and ramp up damage there. Still want Twisted Heart because of the war generation, clearly. I like Omnis, but there are other options. It's nice to round out resistances. If you get LP, that's great, but it's so rare. Don't worry about it. I just got pretty lucky with this one. But you can also if you want to go super offensive, you can pick up a Confluence of Fate. That's having an extra 45 spell damage is incredible. Or you can go the safe route and just get a Bleeding Heart and have extra spell leech, life leech off of your Infernal Shade. For an offhand, I've been just sticking with Rotmind and going the more offensive route, having that extra poison damage, an extra +1 to Infernal Shade is great, a little bit more poison leech, and plus the 17% less damage over time. These are all great things because of that damage over time bypassing armor and such it's a nice modifier to get. But you can also, if you want to, still use a shield. If you want to use zombie or skeletons, you can, and you could use Synathias to get extra resurrection. Or you could pick something different and just go with minion health and armor or whatever, if you want something more defensive. Otherwise, boots with resistances are good. If you want to look at some of the experimental affixes, the Frenzy or Haste after Teleport look very appealing for this build. Body still standard, just go for max armor and then health and armor and some Dreadshade if you can pick it up. Similar for helm, we want the ward retention helm with health and armor, and then minion health just for extra ward from our zombies. And like I said, a dragon horn wand is ideal for general purpose usage. And yeah, just get that extra elemental damage over time and cast speed. There are a couple of other options. So of course I still have a Ghost Maker. This is just for boss killing primarily, but because I do want to have that mana cost reduction when I'm just walking around monoliths. But for boss setup, Ghost Maker is still fantastic. And if you are lucky enough to get a wrong warp, this opens up. This is just fun. I mean, you teleport around. You get a 35% cast speed and move speed buff that stacks with Frenzy and Haste. So it's pretty ridiculous. But and you could combine it with, a move speed advent or other high move speed boots. This also gives you a haste source, and it gives you more ward when you get haste. You could replace your offhand with a nice cuckoo if you get a cuckoo. I actually kind of love this thing because it gets like 60 forging potential when it transforms, so you can easily re-roll the implicits and build it kind of however you want. I haven't gotten one that actually meshes well with Infernal Shade yet, but it looks pretty fun, and the extra haste stacks really well with wrong warp and advent. So it's a fun thing if you just want to zip through monoliths and destroy everything. Go for it. If you find that you're having mana problems, especially if I'm going to talk about other build options, but for mana, if you have mana problems, you might consider Foot of the Mountain. It's just very slow, and so I don't love it, and it doesn't have any resistances to shore up those, but it's, plus 11 to all attributes is incredible. Nothing special about idols. I just get health, get shore up resistances, and then stack vitality. We don't need to worry about necrotic or poison resistances anymore, really, because of the change to vitality. Which now gives 1 point necrotic, 1 point poison per vitality. So yeah, we really can just focus on void and physical for these humble idols. Yeah, so that's really not a whole lot different with gear, but we're just on the belt. Because we're potion based, I do like have that increased chance to find potions. That means, so when I play, I usually just have one less potion than max, and then there will usually be a ton of potions all over the ground. And then, of course, just anything to add health and or armor. This is a kind of not a very good belt. I'd love to get a tier 6 or tier 7 Volatile Zombies. The highest you can get is better. And I sealed it, but ran out of forging potential. So this belt sucks. I hope you get a good one. But even as it is, it's worth it to the build just to be able to create zombies on the fly. So I did want to say that with the changes in 092, if you've been playing, you know that there have been some connectivity issues that has influenced me a bit. That's why I'm not consistently using wrong warp, because constant short duration teleports seem to kind of amplify and exacerbate the connectivity problems with the servers right now. I get a lot more rubber banding. So I'm just going slow and steady, running through the levels. That is also why I don't have transplant specialized. One reason. Also, I just like the minions from Bone Curse, but yeah, I'm not using transplant reliably. It's still possible to get some slowdown. We're making so many minions. With all the explosions and extra minions created, that sometimes I've run into problems where the server just can't keep up and enemies disappear and I lag for a long time. I've sent reports. I know that they're looking into it and I trust that they'll resolve it eventually. But just so you know, some things you can do. So one is don't use transplant. Two, um, I would take out Bone Nova. That actually seems to slow the server down just because it's casting so many Bone Novas. So you can just cut this branch out and fill up this chain down here instead. The 60% multiplier is nice, but not essential. Um, I imagine that not having Shepherd of Thralls might make things easier too on your computer, but I'm not 100% sure. It won't be as significant as Bone Nova or Transplant. Okay, I just wanted to go through some of the alternatives for if you don't want to use Bone Curse with Bone Prison. You could always just keep skeletons. You probably want Mindcatcher to make sure they're net mana positive. You could give them Ward. You can also make them cast Bone Armor on you, which is nice to have a 10% defensive layer. If you do Bone Armor, make sure you remove archers just to make sure everyone's casting Bone Armor and that you're getting your Bone Armor that way. This might not work very well with all the minions you have. I'm not sure that they actually will target you or that they will live long enough to do Bone Armor, but it was the only thing I could really think of that would be a reason to use skeletons instead of the Bone Curse. Because Bone Curse, you can make it necrotic, so it will trigger Twisted Heart, whereas skeletons will not trigger Twisted Heart. You're just relying on them to give ward through Soul Catcher. And it takes more casts of Summon Skeleton than it does the Bone Curse to get the same number of minions, and actually Bone Curse will give you more minions total, has a higher cap of minions. So I just don't see a real reason to use Summon Skeletons unless you're really having trouble with mana, in which case then yeah, they are a solid choice. You could go the Transplant route. Transplant is very useful to specialize. You can make it into Necrotic, which will give us that Twisted Heart bonus. You can get guaranteed Haste and Frenzy. Cooldown. You also get a minion when you cast it. If you are using Wrong Warp, this could be really useful, especially if they make Wrong Warp's cooldown reduction actually be 39% or whatever it is. Right now it's only giving like 12% cooldown reduction, so hopefully they fix that. Another source of Bone Armor and an improved Bone Armor, so that's nice. If you want to do a healing route, Drink Deep is actually pretty useful because this healing is based off your maximum health as opposed to like Aura of Decay, which is missing health. And this healing over time is affected by your improved healing stat. So it's one way to power your healing up. But I just haven't found that super necessary since we're kind of using potions, and Necromancer has really good potions. So also I just don't like relying casting on Transplant a lot because it seems to have rubber banding issues like I was talking about with Wrong Warp. So it just didn't feel worthwhile to me. Maybe at some point I can chain cast it more reliably and then it might outshine Bone Curse, but I really like just the ability to set up 10 plus minions in one cast. That's very useful to me, especially for bosses. Other ways you could go, you could always try Rip Blood. Having Arcane Absorption with all this increased cast speed is very nice to stack spell damage. We don't really need to do that in general because we can stack Dread Shades instead for bosses, but it might be a more consistent source of damage to use Rip Blood for monoliths and things like that. And you can make it necrotic again, trigger that Twisted Heart, which is nice with the extra cast speed. And yeah, so it's definitely a possibility. But in general, I would rather be casting Dreadshade, whereas with Rip Blood you really want to be casting Rip Blood all the time. So if you want something that's really defensive but more passive than Transplant, you could do Aura of Decay. The Absence of Life, this healing is affected by increased healing effectiveness, so this can work out. This can really help us like stay topped off for our other spell casts, which would trigger Twisted Heart. You also get some utility, adding Slow and Chill. But you can get both of these on your weapon too, so you don't really need it. And it's okay. But if we're using 2 cycles of Putrescence, it's really going to be hard to find spots for increased healing effectiveness. But just so you know, it's an option. If you want to do something kind of weird and out there, you could try Soul Feast. I love this node. Toxic Craving is amazing, especially for Necromancer, because we can get all that flat armor off of Martyrdom, and this then gives us a route for massive increased armor percent. You just need to make sure you have some sources of poison, so probably your weapon. You can turn Aura of Decay on without specializing it and just take it off your skill bar, leave it on. And these nodes will give you extra poison chance. But you don't want to be casting Soul Feast too much because of the high mana cost. This would ideally you just have passive ways to add poison and then cast it once in a while. I don't know how effective it would ultimately be, but it might be fun if you want more buttons to click and something else to manage, and it should make you significantly more tanky. So those are some basic options. There's one more. We could go Spirit Plague. Spirit Plague is pretty cool because in Dreadshade we have this cast Spirit Plague whenever Dreadshade expires. So that means whenever your minion dies or naturally times out or whatever. So you get free Spirit Plagues now. And if we have free Spirit Plagues, we really only need to cast Dreadshade at this point. The only thing that we're manually casting still is Infernal Shade, and we can get rid of that by Effigy of Combustion. So this is our 1-button build, where our zombies keep up Infernal Shades. We can also use a Ghostmaker to help them out. You can 1 point or 2 points, that's kind of up to you. 2 is more consistent. 1 is easier on your mana. 1 might be enough with Ghostmaker. Kind of experiment and try it out. And because we're doing this, we give up the fear and invest more in leap attack instead to get our zombies into combat as fast as possible. If you do that, make sure you take out any points in Legion, because you don't want that extra mana cost. That will really hurt you. And then what to do with Spirit Plague? Well, it does a decent amount of base damage over time. It's nothing explosive, but it will help just in clearing general monoliths. And then I like to go to Anguish because I like Fear. I'm a big fan of it, especially guaranteed long durations of Fear. So this is definitely one option, and that will kind of compensate for getting rid of Army of Nightmares. And then, I just took some damage modifiers. This Pestilence is actually pretty useful. If you can keep it up, you'll get 200 almost % increased spell damage over time. So that will help up your Infernal Shade, but only really for clearing monoliths. It won't help against prepping for boss fights or anything. We get utility, we get frailty stacks, that's great, and some slowing. And we also get ward on hit. And we are generating a lot of hits with our explosive sacrifice chains, especially with Bone Novas. So it's very viable. And this is kind of the way I would do it for a 1-button build. to get everything flowing together. That's. I don't think there are any other major changes you would have to make to how for a one button build. But one thing that's nice is if you're going one button and you want to be lazy and or even lazier, or if you just need to, if you just don't. I mean, I played that Sentinel that's channeling Rebuke all the time, and it even with autocast, it kind of totally destroyed my hands and arms channeling for hours at a time, like in the arena. So it can be nice to have a break where you don't have to be active all the time. And one way to do that is just go low health, go low life, and pick up, make it, try to, if you can make a nice Exsanguinous and Last Steps of the Living, get that passive ward generation, swap out Twisted Heart for an Ambitions, or anything you want really here. I mean, the plus to skills is nice, but if you, it's not critical, so you could try something else if you have just a nice Exalted here. There might be other uniques too. I haven't really explored low life builds. You can try out the new experimental gloves. It's going to cause some mana problem. You just have to be careful about your mana. Just be careful. You have to kind of observe and see if you can handle it. It's really nice, but I would just be worried about how all of your zombies, the effigy of combustion is. I might go down to 1 point there instead of 2. But it's something to try, and in general, I don't love low life just because you end up sacrificing a bunch of armor and max health unless you get really good at legendary items. So it hasn't been my preference. I like to just keep those high. Plus, your overall effective hit point maximum for like one-shot hits might go down a bit because you don't have that health reservoir to draw on. Whereas if we're using Twisted Heart and healing, then we can get high levels of ward, but we also can get our hit points up. So you can double draw. But I think it's good to point out that it's a possibility. You would also change your passives up a bit. You would not want Life Drinker. You either want to get rid of Survival of the Cruel or to take Hollow Lich and turn that into increased damage. The really nice, okay, I will say this. The really nice thing about low life builds is that you can take Dance with Death, Unclosing Wounds, and potentially, if you want, you can also take Blood Pact and really get some fantastic increased damage. This is another couple hundred, like 200%, more 250, almost 300% increased damage through passives. So yeah, that's really good. It kind of depends on how the rest of your gear is, like just how good that is. If you had like a wand with tier 7 increased elemental damage over time, maybe low life isn't going to be that big of a boost for you. But if you don't, then it might be fantastic. So, and I can definitely see the appeal, especially I think it would make for a very consistent and fast farming of low level monoliths because you don't have to worry about keeping your ward up. It's just always there for you. And you have that extra damage. So just some possibilities. I hope that all makes sense. If you have other suggestions or thoughts, or if I got something wrong, let me know. So I forgot to go over passive changes. There's not a lot of changes, but the big thing is we can't take Dark Rituals unless we also have a minion skill. So without that we're manually casting. So without skeletons, we miss out on this 20% speed boost. If you take skeletons, then take it. It's great. Otherwise, the rest of this is still pretty standard. Just maxing out our potion healing. You can take Soul Drinker if you want. I found it not super reliable, but it's fine. and then focusing on armor. You have so many minions now that Empty the Graves is amazing, especially if you bring out 10 or 20 bone wall segments. It's kind of insane, but literally. And I got out of Tyrant because I wanted to generate more ward with my zombies, so I took that, focused on Tyrant. Since the war generation from zombies is starting to is really kind of overtaking the war generation from Twisted Heart. If it was the other way around, then I would max Tyrant. And this tree is the same. You could go into Mental Cacophony if you wanted, but nah. Okay, so that said, why don't we just do some demos real quick? So yeah, using potions right away is a nice way just to grab health. It offsets the bonuses, the penalty of Twisted Heart. I love that fear, but some people don't. Yeah, the one button build is actually just really nice, really consistent if you go that way instead. See what I mean? There's some major lag. Very sad. I really hope they figure it out soon. But it's still playable and you can still have fun as things are. You just have to be a little bit aware of what you're doing and what impacts you. I'm on a wired gigabit connection as well, so I don't think it's on my end. I mean, we know that there's problems with the servers. Do. And that's it. There you go. All right, I'm going to do a boss demo, and that's it. Okay, so here I am with Julra, tier 4, just to do a boss kill. I'm going to use Ghostmaker for the more Infernal Shade damage per active Wraith. We use Lich's Envy for more spell fire damage per active Dreadshade. And then we're going to use our potion or our belt to maximize our zombies that are available. And we'll use Bone Curse to get the extra bone segments for initial minions. So you have to kind of be careful about the timing because the Wraiths are decaying and your Dreadshades are decaying and your Bone Curse is decaying. So you have to kind of get everything out there together before you actually cast Infernal Shade. But if you do, she should die, any boss should die very quickly. So I'm going to do, I think, Wraiths first, then Bone Curse, then Dread Shades, and then try to get my Infernal Shade out. And I think I'll do the zombies first right now. Well, that wasn't the fastest kill, but I think it could have been faster if I had manually detonated the Dread Shades instead of letting them decay naturally. I just sat there and cast Dread Shade over and over again. But still, she didn't get a chance to even do her ultimate or anything. and I'm not even optimized for damage. So the point is, very fast boss killing. There are some caveats. Number one, you with the Ghost Maker, if you don't have enough damage to kill them instantly before they start summoning extra enemies, this Ghostmaker can totally ruin your damage, because it has a chance to create Infernal Shade when an enemy dies, and that will overwrite your pumped up, ramped up shade. Lich's Envy, some bosses, like the Titan's Heart in the Lightless Arbor, that boss fight starts kind of awkwardly, where you click a transition and then you're right there. You don't have time to really set. You can set up beforehand, but then it increases your kind of delay, where you have to click and transition real quick before actually casting Infernal Shade, and the fight has already started. So if you can't get max Dread Shades, or you can't get max Wraiths before casting Infernal Shade, that's okay. Just, get a couple of them, because you don't want a situation where, as you're transitioning, for example, your Dread Shade blows up and clears out all of your minions, and you don't have an Infernal Shade cast yet. Just something to be careful of. But it's okay. Like this, you're going to do so much damage, and just the fact that you can ramp infinitely, just having a few instances of both of these modifiers is totally fine. It'll be fine. Yeah, that's basically everything I wanted to show you, though. Thank you for watching my videos again. I appreciate the positive feedback I've gotten. And if you have questions, they're always welcome in the comments, or you can message me in game, also Hineroptera. I will put links for the current build and the variants in the description. And if I forgot anything, let me know. And thanks, and I'll see you next time.